what's going on, peeps? This is Ashen Eclipse back with another Diablo 3 video. I don't know if you guys have experienced this or not, but I sure as heck did back in the day when I first started doing seasons, and that is, what the heck do I do as far as being efficient goes when it comes to getting to level 70 and then getting to the very first part of the gear grind as far as getting whatever set you want, whether that's the set from the seasonal conquest or a different set. So basically, this guide is going to be just a beginning of the season sort of guide, like day one sort of thing. So first thing you're going to want to do when you start a new season right after you make your characters, you're going to make sure to set your difficulty to master. There really isn't any reason to set it below master. That's why if you set it below master, you're just gimping yourself as far as your experience gain and your gold gain and all that good stuff, and it's just going to take you longer to level. As far as what kind of abilities you want to use, you're pretty much just going to want to use all of the abilities that have the highest percent damage. So like, for example, Corpse Lance you would want to use as soon as you got it, along with anything else that had a high percentage chance, or a high damage percentage rather, as far as your abilities go. And then probably something like Blood Rush just for the mobility. So that's the abilities part of it. And then for your armor, you're going to want to look for a Leoric's helmet, Leoric's crown. This is really huge if you can get one of these early on in your leveling stage, just because once you have one, all you have to do is get a red gem, and then that will help you gain significantly more EXP way faster than you would have otherwise. Then as far as the actual leveling process goes, usually what I do personally is I just go through Act 1 and do the bounties, and then Act 2 and do the bounties, and you're going to be starting on adventure mode, of course, so that you can actually do that. So I just go through all the bounties and keep doing that until I hit 70. And then as soon as I hit 70, I start working on not only my seasonal conquest, whatever my seasonal conquest requires, as far as tasks go for what it wants me to do for my first pieces of set gear. And then not only that, but once I hit 70, I also start doing rifts. And for the most part, for me personally, I usually just rotate between bounties and doing rifts. That way I'm getting bounty mats, which I'll need later on. And the bounties, of course, once you finish all the bounties for an act, that actually does give you pretty good experience gain, which is another reason to do bounties as soon as you hit 70. Or, sorry, before you hit 70 rather than after you hit 70 still. But there's the EXP gain and the bounty mats, and then the rifts are for your kind of your gold gain, and then EXP gain is good as far as just doing normal rifts. And then also the main reason you're doing rifts at 70 or right after you hit 70 is, of course, so that you can grind for gear. So there's that, and then I would say probably after you get about 2/3 of whatever set you want, whether it's your set from doing your seasonal conquest or just a set from getting drops, I would say once you're about 2/3 done with your set, then it's usually good to start doing greater rifts. Of course, because of the XP gain, the gold gain, and with greater rifts you have a better chance of getting legendary and set items and all that good stuff. Mostly just all the stuff that you need as far as progression goes. For this next season I will be playing Necromancer just because of the set that Necromancer gets from their seasonal conquest compared to Monk. I wasn't too ecstatic when they announced Monk was getting Raymond as their seasonal conquest set. It's just it's kind of awkward because just the Raymond set by itself really isn't all that strong. So I figure because of the set difference from the seasonal conquest, and just because Necromancer is new, I figured I would go ahead and go with Necromancer this time in my seasonal push. Let's see, what else? For the most part too, when you first start a season, you pretty much want to pick up everything. Literally everything. Even gems. Because it does help you down the road. And as far as mats go especially, that's why I'm saying pick everything up, because when you're in your leveling process, doing bounties, there isn't a whole lot of opportunity to get like white or gray items, for example, for those reusable parts, but there usually is plenty of yellows and blues and all that good stuff that you can salvage for mats. So it's pretty much good to pick up stuff as often as possible. And yeah, it'll cost you a little bit of time running back and forth to town to salvage stuff, but it's generally worth it in the long run. Oh, I forgot to mention the difficulty scaling. For your difficulty, I would say you're going to want to keep it at master at least until you get one legendary that you can actually use, that is. And then once you get a legendary that actually benefits you, then you can bump it up. Probably, I'd say just one difficulty level, so go from whatever, go from like master to whatever is above master. You may even be able to go 2 difficulty levels higher than master, depending on what kind of legendary you get, of course. If you get a weapon, then that's huge, because that gives you a crazy damage boost, which probably actually would allow you to bump 2 difficulty levels higher than master. But other than that, I usually just strictly stick to if I get a legendary, then I go up a difficulty level, and then I just keep doing that while I'm leveling. That way the difficulty of the monsters isn't overwhelming, because since you got that legendary item, the way it would scale is the legendary item would actually boost your stats enough to where upping the difficulty by 1 really doesn't affect you a whole lot, or at least it shouldn't. if you're keeping up on switching your blues and yellows out for ones that are better. So it doesn't usually affect you, at least it shouldn't. And that way, every time you get a legendary, you can up the difficulty, which increases your EXP gain, along with your gold gain, and gives you a better chance of getting legendary items too, of course. As far as the cube goes, I don't usually go for the cube until I'm 70. Actually, for the most part, usually during seasons, I actually tend to wait to go for the cube till I have at least 2 pieces of a set. Usually the seasonal conquest set. That's usually when I go for the cube. So you guys could do it a little bit earlier if you wanted to, like right after you hit 70, you can go find your cube. There's really nothing wrong with that. It's just the area that the cube is in is a little bit more difficult area, so I tend to wait a little bit before actually going and hunting it down, just to make sure I have the proper gear for it and the proper stats. That way I don't just go in and face plant myself trying to get to the cube and waste time. So let's see. And then later on, probably, I'd say later on, well, before the season starts, preferably you guys are going to want to research what kind of items you're going to want for your set, whether you're going for your seasonal conquest set or another one. And then that'll streamline that process a little bit. And then I would say after you've been soloing Greater Rifts for a good amount of time and you have pretty decent gear, not super optimal gear, but all the gear you need, all the correct gear that is for whatever set you're running, I would say at that point it would be good to actually start trying to do Greater Rifts in parties, just for that additional EXP gain and gold gain and the extra drop chance from being in a party. And for that, you're generally just going to want to find parties that are, they're doing what they're comfortable with. They're not trying to do anything crazy, like push too hard to where they're just constantly dying, because at that point you're just wasting time and you aren't being as effective that way. So if you happen to get into a party that's just face planting themselves all over the place and sliding across the ground, getting dirt burn, then you should probably switch parties and save yourself some time. The other thing to research in advance too is what follower you're going to use for whatever class or builds you're going to be playing. That's another important thing to research. And then I would say for the most part that's really about it. With during the stage where you're like after you hit level 70 and you're at the stage where you're doing rifts and greater rifts, you shouldn't just laser beam focus yourself on only getting set pieces. You should still be looking to replace any gear that you have with gear that's better, even if you're replacing a legendary with another legendary. As long as there is a stat gain and
I should not
preferably even secondary unique affix that actually helps you out. That's huge. You don't want to, just because you hit 70, you don't want to stop looking for better gear, because that'll hinder your progress, and it'll take you much longer than it would normally to progress with your seasonal conquest to actually get your seasonal conquest set. Unless, of course, you get really lucky and you happen to get a set from just doing rifts and greater rifts, but or even bounties. Um, so the other beneficial thing when you first start a new season 2 is if you can actually find people to party with. That's pretty huge because of the EXP buff that you get from being in a party with others when you first start a season is pretty huge. Especially if you guys get lucky and start getting legendaries left and right, then it gets really pretty easy to level. But that all just comes down to luck. Unfortunately, there isn't any advice that I can really give as far as that goes. This is just a good old RNG bis. So, for I think that's about all I have as far as advice goes for when you first start a season. So, I hope you guys found this guide somewhat informative at the very least. If you did, feel free to poke the like button or share the video or subscribe if you're new. And I will see you guys in the next one. Later.